In the last two videos, I discussed about demand. What are the factors and determinant of demand? What causes a movement along the demand curve? What are the factors that causes demand to change? In this video, I shall discuss about supply and the factors that affecting supply. So in one sense, supply is the mirror image of demand. For example, if you decide to rest rather than work, now you can hire someone to do the job. You demand labor. On the other hand, the one who decided to work, he preferred more income instead of more rest. So he basically supplied labor to you. So you trade money for labor and he traded labor for money. His supply is the mirror image of your demand. However, for a large number of goods and services, the supply process is more complicated than demand. Just like demand schedule and supply curve, we have supply schedule and supply curve. Supply schedule is a table showing how much of a product a farm or producer will supply at different prices. And the supply curve is the illustration of that supply schedule. That means how much of a given product a farm would be willing to sell at different prices. So if you look at this diagram, these two differences will be clear. In the left diagram, which is a table, basically depicts the relationship between price and quantity supplied. So this tabular relationship between price and quantity supplied, simply the supply schedule. And if you use this information and draw a graph, which is on your right, that becomes the supply curve. So supply curve essentially the information that you use from supply schedule. Now let's discuss about supply and quantity supplied. Again, if you follow the last video on demand versus quantity demand, supply again is not same as quantity supplied. Supply refers to the supply curve and quantity supplied refers to a specific point on that curve. Law of supply. Just like law of demand, law of supply also tells the relationship between price and quantity supplied. In this case, however, when price goes up, quantity supply increases, and when there is a decrease in price, quantity supply decreases. So in this relationship, the arrow should be downward. So when price goes down, quantity supply goes down as well. So this means the quantity supply and the price shows a positive relationship. So they move in the same direction. Hence, the supply curve typically have a positive slope. Now let's discuss about the movement along the supply curve and shift in the supply curve. Movement along the supply curve only occurs when there is any changes in price of a good or services. So if you look at this graph, when price decreases from P1 to P0, quantity supply decreases from PA1 to PA0. So this movement along the same supply curve occurs when price changes. However, when other factors except price changes, just like the demand schedule, we can observe a shift in the supply curve. So say for example, when the input cost, which is one of the major determinant of supply, if input cost increases, that means the cost of production will increase. Therefore, supplier will be felt discouraged to supply more. In that case, supply will decrease. So on the other hand, if there is a decrease in the input cost, that means with the same level of output, the cost of production will be lower and supplier will be encouraged to supply more. So in this diagram, as you can see, So when supply curve moves to its right, this means there is an increase in supply. Now let's look at the determinant of supply. There are quite a few determinants. Of course, price is one of them. Also, the cost of production, expectation, government policy, and competitions are there as well. I'll go one by one with these determinants. The first one, which is of course the most important determinant of supply, which is price. So any changes in price causes a movement along the supply curve. So supply is the most crucial determinant of supply. It only causes movement along the movement along this same supply curve. However, other factors causes shift in the supply curve. Shift might be a rightward shift, there might be a leftward shift. A rightward shift indicates an increase in supply, which can be depicted this way. So when your supply moves to its right, this means supply is increased. When supply curve moves to its left, this means there is a decrease in supply. So now let's talk about the factors that shifts the supply curve. The number one factor is the prices of input. So there might be quite a few input like labor, capital, land, entrepreneurship, and so on. If the input cost rises with no changes in output, so naturally profit will be lower and farm will feel discouraged to supply more. And opposite is true as well. So in both cases, when input cost rises without any changes in output, supplier tends to supply less, and when the input cost goes down, supplier tends to supply more. There is another important factor which shifts the supply curve is the technology. We have observed in the last few decades that the technology changed so many things. In fact, it not only lowers the cost of production, but it also increases the experience of the consumer as well. So technology's role on both sides is pretty evident. However, when new technology arises, naturally, in most cases, we saw a reduction in cost of production. So naturally, when there is the reduce in the cost of production, supplier feels encouraged to supply more, and that leads to an increase in supply. Government policy. There are quite a few government policy that affects supply. The most important one is the tax. Tax is the payment to fund government services. There might be corporate tax, there might be income tax, and so on, or taxes on input, etc. So tax always add cost of production. So when there is an increase in tax, cost of production will be higher, and that may lowers the supply. Subsidy is the opposite of tax, which is the payment from the government to the private producers, in most cases to ensure an affordable supply. So this is basically the opposite of tax, and it lowers the cost of production. So when there is any subsidy, we can expect more supply from producer. Regulation. Regulation can be, it could increase the supply, it might lower the supply as well, depending on what sort of regulation the government is taking. Some regulations are good, that might encourage producer to produce more, and some regulation might be detrimental, and that might discourage producer to produce less. Expectations. This is important because suppliers always consider the factors that how his or her product will be valued in future period of time. If the supplier expect that the price of its good will be increased at some future point of time, then it might store some of its supply today and sell it later. So it's based on expectation of the future price of the product. Supplier might change its behavior, and it might increase or decrease depending on the depending on the expectation. If it's a positive expectation that price might increase in future, then it might lower the supply in the short run. And if it expects the price will be lower in future, it might supply more in the coming period. There is another factor, which is competition. So we'll talk in great detail in post midterm when we'll talk about perfect market, monopoly, oligopoly, and so on. So competition also affects supply. Without having knowledge of competition, the level of competitions and the nuances of competition, it is actually very difficult to say how that competition will affect. But competition might affect positively, competition might affect negatively. So I'm not going to comment on that. So this is a mixed result. It depends on the structure of the market and the product, of course. So these are the factors that we have discussed. Input cost factors that determine the production, technology, government policy, and expectation. These are the core 4 factors that shift the supply curve. And when these factors moves in a favorable way for that encourages producers or gives some incentive or lowers the cost of production, you can expect producer will supply more, and vice versa. Only for the case of price, there will be a movement along the supply curve. Other factors causes supply curve to shift to its right or left. Thank you.